So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Clark. I'm the Director of Architectural Services here at ATG. And I'm going to have each one of our panelists go ahead and do a quick introduction on themselves, and then we'll get started. Logistically, everyone has a Q&A button in the lower portion of their Zoom, and that is where you can type your questions in, and I will be the moderator, so I'll go through and feed the questions to the panelists and make sure that we try to get through as many questions as we can. We have a great group of people, very diverse experience, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of good questions. So you can type them in the question and answer. I'll be also watching the chat as well. And so let's go ahead and get it started. So we'll start with John, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, John Rose. I'm with Devenney Group Architects out of Phoenix. I'm the Director of Design Technology for them. I've been there for almost 6 years, and I cover basically everything BIM related, including some 3D printing as well. So,
perfect. Stephen.
Hello. My name is Steve Schell. I'm one of the few people here that's a sole proprietor. I don't really work with anybody. My engineers, that's about it, and then my clients. So I kind of represent the one-person shop, and I've been that way now for about 34 years of having my own practice, and been using Revit since the very beginning prior to Autodesk, around release 3.1 or 4, whatever it was. So I'm here just to kind of help people on just everyday Revit issues and hopefully represent the people that are in the trenches just banging away on the keyboard.
Perfect, thank you. Patrick?
Hi, Patrick Podine. I am an AEC technical specialist here at ATG in the Phoenix office. I love Dynamo, love using it, love showing people all the awesome, cool things that they can do in their day-to-day workflow to help them, give them more time. And one random fact, well, two, I'm a huge foodie, so being in Phoenix, there's a lot of food around, and I used to be a scratch golfer.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. All right. That leaves you, Bob.
All right. I'm Bob Bell. I work for Stantec. I'm a digital practice specialist there. I'm the opposite end of the spectrum from Steve. We currently have approximately 24,000 employees. The buildings division, which I work in, has approximately 6,000 employees. I am part of a corporate team that manages content, best practices, business strategy for the buildings group, that sort of thing. I've been in the industry for more years than I care to admit. In fact, a while back, I got a LinkedIn invite where the person who obviously English wasn't their first language said they wanted to connect for my ancient experience in MEP. So made me regret career choices that maybe it's about time to change or something.
Because you're ancient.
Yes.
Yeah, every year when I have to add up the numbers of years experience, I cringe because I can't believe it's got to this point, but keep adding it up. Perfect. So I don't currently have any questions in, so feel free to type in your questions, but I'm going to go ahead and just start with something that, obviously we're all dealing with at this point in time, and that's working remotely. How are you handling that? Are your offices back open? I mean, that's a potential. Some people are dealing with that. So, what technologies are you using to work remote, and how's that going for everyone?
I'll start. Okay. So our office is never fully closed. We've always been able to access the office if we needed it. There are people that are going in every day. It's a very small few, but they do decide to go to the office rather than stay at home. For technology, the big thing for us that's really improved is Teams. We were kind of dabbling with Teams before COVID hit, and when it did, it really pushed us to get on board. And our entire staff across 5 offices in 3 states just kind of hit the ground running, and now we do everything that we can through Teams. We have a couple of Zoom accounts for if we need to do like breakout huddles or if we have to have more people on cameras. But Teams has been literally a crutch. Without it, I don't think we would have been able to survive and get information to each other the way we have. So it's been huge.
From our perspective at Stantec, we knew office closures were going to start happening, that we would have to support remote work, and happily we had an infrastructure in place that was already largely capable of doing that. The IT department did have to spin up a bunch of additional VPN gateways because the existing infrastructure for the gateways wasn't sufficient to handle the sheer load of VPN connections coming in from all the remote workers. But that was really the only real issue that we faced as a large company with that. That being said, that was because a large portion of the design groups were already using laptops, so they were already a largely mobile workforce. The folks that had desktop computers, we had to spin up a bunch of additional laptops for those to be able to remote into their workstations back at the office. We were already largely implementing BIM 360 on projects, so really the only hiccup that we faced in that perspective was to move projects that were on file servers in offices, move those over to BIM 360. But we had a 2 to 3 week window where we knew that we were going to be closing offices, so we were able to identify most of those projects and get them moved over to BIM 360 prior to people actually having to go full-time remote.
Perfect. Now, as far as, collaborating, via Zoom or Teams or whatever people are using, just as, designers and how we interact, and just that ability to pop over to someone's desk and easily, get some feedback or even ask a question. Are people finding that that is a challenge, or are people not asking for the help that they need, or are they coming, directly to you, John, rather than maybe a power user or something sitting around them? Are there other means of collaborating, communicating? Are you doing charrettes via Zoom? It's just all these things that we typically interact with each other. That how are we addressing that?
So we've used a few of the plugins to Teams and honestly, my design team's been using them. I haven't, so I don't actually know the name of the plugin, unfortunately. But there's a few different plugins that allow you to have multiple users interacting at the same time through this system, and that's been really huge for our designers. They've been able to basically, they each have a paintbrush, so they can live in the same space. So that's helped quite a bit for that type of information. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we actually have done an interview for a project through Zoom, which we did a charrette, and we had slides and the whole thing, which was new to the firm. We've never worked that way, and actually it was new for the client. They had never asked for interviews that way. So I would say, it's not necessarily a new normal that this is going to be the case, but I think you're going to see a lot more of this in the future. And it was a rough beginning. The first 2 to 3 weeks were kind of, okay, how do we do this? How do we keep people on task? How do we make sure that we know what everyone's doing? We've really tried to push some lean practices in our office in the last few years. So the tasks and then Trello has been something we've implemented, which again is something you can add to Teams. So that's all of that has really, it's pushed our workflows. And for most of our staff, when you talk to most of our staff, they're more productive now than they were when we were sitting in an office 5 feet from each other.
That's actually something that we're hearing a lot because it seems that people are a little bit more focused working remotely. Is anyone considering making it, if people want to continue to work remotely, is that going to be an option for people on your teams? Or once the offices get fully reopened, the expectation will be to come back into the office?
I know there's discussions. I don't know the final outcome, but we were always flexible to begin with. We were moving all of our staff to laptops as of the end of last year anyways. So 99% of our staff have laptops. So when this hit, we really didn't have to do a whole lot of ramping up. So I believe you're going to see some form of mobility in the future. Everything's possible, really. I mean, it could be full-time, it could be 2 days a week, it could be whenever you need it. I'm not sure. I'm not involved in the corporate conversation for that, but I believe my own opinion is that this is absolutely the future for a lot of businesses, including ours. I don't see the reason this can't work.
Perfect. What about you, Bob? With Stantec being so large, I assume that you might have already had something like this in place and have a lot of remote workers already.
That's true. The design teams themselves largely were in-office design teams, but they were already pretty accustomed to using Teams chat to chat with one another rather than getting up and walking across a few cubes to talk to a person face to face anyway. The only real downside that we've seen is just the ad hoc meetings, getting a few people together into a room and hammering some things out. But the remote technology has still allowed us to do something that's 90% satisfactory. It's just that last missing bit of human interaction that's sometimes useful. We do find a lot of people, though, are really used to using chat. And once we moved fully over into Teams, having more and more people are using video chat, so actually turning on video so people can see each other, and that's been a big help too.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important to sort of make that connection. Something that we have been doing internally is I feel like we have a weekly kickoff meeting as a company as a whole to really get everyone united. We've done things like happy hours or like coffees in the morning just to make sure everyone stays connected and has that camaraderie and feels that they're still sort of part of a team. So I feel like it's working well. It's definitely a lot better than I had ever anticipated. Like John, I mean, most of our employees already were working as far as the technical side. We had laptops and the ability to work from anywhere since we did travel quite a bit. We're still restrictive on some travel, but we're taking that case by case, and depending on who the trainer who might need to go out or the technical specialist, we're just deciding that kind of on one-on-one. Okay.
I'm curious, Steve, on what your interaction has been with your clients and consultants, et cetera, over the last few months.
It's interesting because, I mean, I hate to say this, I guess I've been operating this element for 34 years now. So my idea of working remotely is when I'm on my laptop in the living room. That's remote working for me. Otherwise, I'm here in my office at home. Clients and I, we still physically get together. We can still socially distance. We can still wear a mask. We can sit at a large enough table to where I can interact with them. But for the most part, telephone. My clients, they're all repeat clients over these past 30 some odd years. We've just gotten to a point to where we don't really need to meet. My engineers and I never meet. We just send each other emails and the projects just get done because I've only used the same engineers for 30 years. So I guess I'm in a very lucky position. What's interesting for me that I've seen is, remember back in 2006, 7, and 8, when we went through the economic crisis that we had, I watched all my fellow firms and friends go through a huge reawakening of how they practice architecture and engineering. And back then, everybody kind of started realizing who made money for the firm, who actually worked, who didn't work. And they were really able to take offices that might have had 30 people and get it down to 12. And so that was almost an exercise for what we're going through now. They had to go through that first just to whittle down the people that really were physically working and making money for the office versus a lot of the dead weight that people just didn't realize they were working very inefficiently in extremely non-productive manners. So I think we kind of all headed into this period with an advantage that we wouldn't have had it not been the 2006 economic evils that we had. And now we're finding out the next step of making ourselves more efficient. And a lot of the practices that we're now learning to do, even myself, because I tend to work with the city of Tucson and the county. Although I'm not an official city worker, I tend to be extremely tied into the city of Tucson. I was contracted as the zoning examiner for years. I've been on the Board of Adjustment and the Design Review Board as the chair for over 26 years. I'm basically best friends with everybody down there. So I kind of am brought into their world, and they all know that I embrace technology, and yet I'm still very old school. And a lot of architects here in town are still very old school. Most of my friends don't use Revit. They don't even know what it is. They haven't done a project themselves physically in probably 20 years. They just administrate, and they basically rule the office, and they don't physically do any of the work anymore. So a lot of the people at the city know that I can talk to both people. I can talk to people that are doing production and trying to get their permits and get through the review processes, as well as the owners of the companies that don't really understand these processes because they haven't done it in probably 20 or 30 years. Most of my friends are in their late 60s now, and they laugh at when they call me up and say, "What are you working on?" I said, "I'm doing a door schedule," and they just literally chuckle. They go, "Steve, you've been doing this for 40 some odd years. What are you doing door schedules?" I say, "Well, I'm an architect. That's what we do." But seeing how the city has been dealing with this, because obviously they're like Stantec. I mean, they're just a huge, monstrous company. And the city of Tucson was extremely non-computerized. Everything was still on paper. We didn't have electronic submittals. The city had just gone to electric submittals for site development packages, but not for any of the building permits. So they really got caught just completely off guard. And it was really fun helping the city start to realize what they had to do to move into this virtual world. And so I've been living, I guess you say, by just observing them and helping them through it. So I've been living vicariously through the city with all the new processes that they've been doing. And unfortunately, we're still over 1,000 permits behind, and they're still really in trouble. But hopefully they're going to get cut off. We get to hire 8 new people at the city of Tucson, so hopefully that'll help fill in, and they'll be more technology oriented. They're going to be younger kids. But that's what I'm really seeing. That's the big change, is just how offices are structured and how they do their jobs.
Perfect. And that kind of leads into a follow-up question to that is, how is everyone's workload? Are you seeing a decrease in projects being put on hold? Are our clients panicking? Have you had to do any downsizing, restructuring, and just kind of taking a look at your team? So those 2 or 3 questions there.
I'll go ahead and start off then.
Okay.
For Stantec, we've had a few regions where layoffs have occurred, but that was largely due to economic factors that had started occurring before the crisis hit. The COVID-19 did not help the situation at all, but that certainly did have an impact. Other regions like the Pacific Northwest and Southern California, those regions are going strong. Most of our areas for buildings have not been affected as far as the workload goes. We still see strong backlog, a lot of existing projects that are still going on. Nothing's really been put on hold, that sort of thing. So we've been pretty fortunate in that regard.
Good.
Same here. Our projects change daily. We do have some clients that have put some stuff on hold, but we're healthcare oriented. So right now healthcare is kind of needed. So where our projects, it's interesting. We've had a couple of large projects that have gone on hold, and that's all due to the client. But there's still a ton of work being awarded and being asked for. So literally our workload changes weekly. Sometimes we think we've got everything figured out, and then a few days later we're back to the drawing board. But at the end of the day, we definitely have enough backlog that we're fine.
Perfect. And Stephen, I believe you had mentioned that you're busier than ever, and so that's continuing to be a good thing for everyone. And yeah, I feel like the customers that I'm talking to and that we're interacting with, we're extremely busy at ATG, because for some of the customers who have had to, restructure, downsize, and they still have the projects that need to be completed, they're turning to us to be an extension to their team to help complete some of the projects. But I feel like as a whole, the workload seems to be the same.
So I have a question for Bob Bell.
Sure.
Here in Tucson, our city is so overloaded with plan review, and Stantec and Wildan are both third-party plan reviewers. Are you seeing a surge in that kind of work for your company?
Ironically, I think the Arizona region is one of the few areas that does plan review for Stantec. Most of our regions aren't involved in plan review.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, here you guys are extremely sought after.
No, that's good to know.
And then as far as ATG, I was just curious on their training, if they've seen a surge in people, because I can't tell you how many emails I get from literally all over the world for wanting me to help them learn Revit. And obviously you all know, me very well. I'm not a teacher. I do conferences, I do share my opinions, and I share whatever I do with other people because I do have a passion for that. But at the same time, I'm not a Steve Stafford or someone like Paul Aubin, who is actually, or even you, Bob. I mean, people that actually teach this for a living. I'm just curious if everyone's seeing more and more interest in learning this stuff, because I've kind of seen a huge drop off over these past 4, 5, 6 years.
I feel like it definitely ebbs and flows. I feel like the majority of our customers have already got onto the Revit bandwagon, and they're sort of at that point where they've been using it for 5 or 6 years, and now they're looking at how to be more efficient. So they're not looking for necessarily the essentials training or the basics. They're looking for advanced workflows, or we see a lot of requests for Patrick to do dynamo training because they're trying to find ways to be more efficient, or even hey, can you look at our templates? We need to improve on our template file, or we need to take a look at, we've been getting along, but we need to elevate what we're doing with BIM and take it to that next level. I feel like that's where most of our customers and the industry is reviewing it. Some of the people who are, some of the firms that are a little bit slower right now, I would say they're looking at their template files. They're trying to clean it up. They're trying to implement standards that maybe they didn't have the time to do prior. And so I would say there's less of a need for the essentials, more advanced training.
I see a comment from Danya. Hi, Danya. Related to missing face-to-face training. I would agree with that. We haven't had a whole lot of hiring going on that I've had to be involved with training, but that's starting to change. There's going to be some training coming up here, and I've already had to conduct some, but fortunately it was with someone who's experienced with Revit, and that made it a little bit easier to do over Teams. But the face-to-face training, I think there's some aspects of training that really are valuable when you do them as a hands-on exercise or in a face-to-face circumstance. I struggle to think about how some of the training that I do, where I use whiteboards to drive home the point, that sort of thing, trying to sketch out that whiteboard and do it over a Teams meeting, it's not going to be nearly as fast or as effective as doing it in a real classroom style environment. So that's something that we haven't necessarily addressed real well at Stantec yet, is how to handle that sort of thing.
I think that point, Bob, goes for everybody. I think the hands-on training is something that needs to continue. And I don't think any of us have an answer to if we go full remote, how do we implement that and get the same outcome?
Yep. And Don, you also mentioned that when someone's on Teams and you're trying to do a hands-on exercise, you really can't see what they're doing unless they share their screen, which means that you're in a one-on-one environment, and that's not going to be efficient for instructors' time. So there's a lot to figure out, I think, in that arena.
Yeah, that and being able to read people's faces if you're explaining something and there's someone that's, maybe a little tentative on asking a question, you can kind of read their expression and see, okay, they maybe aren't getting this quite, so maybe I need to go over it a little bit more. Or they do ask a question and you can quickly walk over to their computer and figure out, what's going on. And then once you figure it out, come back and then tell everyone, okay, this is what happened, and this is how we kind of can get past this situation and resolve this issue. So definitely face to face.
Yeah, absolutely agree with the scene expressions too. That was one of my concerns in talking about training with leadership at this point. And the training that I've done to this point, I've required other people to turn on their video camera simply so that I can at least see that part of it. The other crucial part about expressions is just seeing overall engagement. Are they really tuned in with what you're saying, or are they mentally checked out? And you can usually see that in expressions. With a computer, it's a little too easy for somebody to be looking at that second screen over there and checking email instead.
Yeah, that's something we definitely encounter often, because we a couple years ago rolled out our Live 360 option for training, which a lot of people took advantage of because we can train people anywhere, use any resource, but really that engagement and the retention, like, are people understanding it? So. Yeah, that's definitely me personally. Everyone learns differently. Some people learn from reading a book and doing it themselves. I find that me personally and a lot of others need that interaction and that one-on-one time. So.
Emily, I have a question for both Bob and Steve.
Okay.
So the one thing we've struggled with since this happened is our graphics team has a render farm at the office. So I think we've got a handful of boxes that they use as their render farm. And with them working remote, they've had a struggle getting both assets into their renderings and their animations and getting all of that to run over like a VPN or how they have to basically pre-set up a model and then push it back to our network and then run the animation or run the render. Have you guys have any solutions to try? I mean, besides just upping speeds, is there anything else out there that you guys have used or that you guys are using to be able to try and make that process better? They're using Lumion and 3D Studio. Right.
No, there isn't a great technology approach that Stantec has. NVIDIA keeps promoting the distributed rendering farms, graphics engines, but we haven't invested in those, and I don't know that that would truly change the real bottleneck, which is you've got to load up the model, load the assets into it, and then stuff that model somewhere else in order for the render to occur. Remote desktop helps for some of that, mitigates a little bit of that, because at least you can run the model and do that asset work on the office's network itself. But rendering is the one area where we have not really got a good solution.
Emily, I saw someone asked a question about permitting, and I didn't have a chance to read the whole question because I didn't want to tune out what Bob was saying.
Correct. It says, Stephen talked about permitting in Tucson. Have each of your firms had any issues dealing with city review and permitting processes because of COVID closures or even construction issues?
Well, I'll at least tackle that one first since I kind of started the subject. The city of Tucson is going through a massive problem right now. The city manager laid off almost 27 contracted employees. which were considered the low-level employees. Unfortunately, what the city manager didn't realize, those were all the technicians that processed the permits. You know, they didn't get rid of plan reviewers and people that were engineers and actually could evaluate plans. They got rid of all the people that did the processing, the paperwork. So now in Tucson, yes, you can get a plan review at a fairly decent turnaround, especially if you can do virtual or you have a good relationship and if your drawings are good. But the problem is the time it takes just from the time you upload your plans. They need 10 to 15 to 20 days just to log them into the system to give you an activity number to start that workflow. And then once that happens, the reviews all get done. It takes another 5 to 10 to 20 days just to go through the paying for it and the getting of the what they call the permit effectuated and getting it issued and actually releasing the approved plans. So that's where the bottleneck that I'm seeing both on the city and the county side. So the review side is actually pretty straightforward. You know, these guys are pretty good about working with Bluebeam. You know, they've learned how to do real-time Bluebeam kind of interactive reviews. I've helped them through in the county. We did live Bluebeam sessions where I had the plans examiner on the screen at the same time I was, and we were able to in real time go through and type in comments about the plan. And that was almost as good as a virtual meeting on Zoom. So that was working out pretty good. And I had to learn Bluebeam as well on that one because I've never used Bluebeam. So that was kind of an educating myself while I was educating them. And that was an interesting process. But that's where I'm seeing a lot of the bottleneck.
And I can't really address the bottleneck issue for permitting. I'm not closely enough tied to projects to know whether or not there have been issues in that area or not.
Same here.
Okay. Sort of kind of piggybacking on the, Steve learning Bluebeam, is that a software that all of you guys have implemented and fully invested in?
Devenney has. We've had Bluebeam for more years than I've been there, so it's definitely, we've used it for both projects and their studio sessions. We've implemented a QA/QC process in-house that is a full studio session, so that's helped us quite a bit. And the projects I'm kind of on the back and forth with. We have all kinds of places to store stuff these days. We have Nuforma, we have BIM 360, we have Bluebeam Project, there's Dropbox, there's Box, there's all kinds of different ways to store information these days. So trying to implement a standard for that is kind of hit and miss because it changes every year. At this point, our standard is everything goes through Nuforma, and then anything BIM related is on BIM 360.
Yeah, same issue with Stantec. We've been using Bluebeam for quite a while. It's becoming pretty expensive, and that could be a situation of Bluebeam pricing itself out of the market because that's what, why we switched over to Bluebeam in the first place was it was far less expensive than other products doing the same sort of thing. Which means that our workflow could change somewhere in the future just because of that. The issue of where to store project files or how the team communicates with each other through their design files, that's also evolving just like it is in John's case, where we have a set of best practices on where to store documents, Nuforma, Bluebeam, etc. But those change on a per project basis. All we can really do is recommend here's the best places to put your stuff, but here are all your options too in case there's some client requirement, etc.
So I have a question for the group. Being a one-person shop, obviously, I don't really share much. I mean, except with myself. So, and I'm pretty good about what I do with myself. But I do notice, like with BIM 360, and even the A360, as far as with the cloud storage, because I've always done my own backup on my various ways I back up, because I've been, not to be obsessive compulsive, but I literally have 5 backups of absolutely everything, because I'm just paranoid about losing a Revit model. My worst fear in life is I lose a model. Is there an advantage to any of these products for someone like the way I work?
Oh, Yeah, I would say so. If you, BIM 360 is becoming ever more capable in storing documents. You've got versioning control in there. It's on the cloud, so it's going to be there even if there is a huge Amazon hiccup like there was back in, what was it, 2013 or whatever it was. It's going to still be there at the end of the day, and the data secure up there. So there are definitely some advantages to keeping your stuff in a more distributed environment like that. Just the version control alone has been worthwhile.
And that's really the only reason I've been using it, is just to be able to store off site,
Yeah.
because God forbid I should have a fire in my own house. Obviously, the stuff that's in my vault is the only thing that would be really safe, and I only upload that once a week. So I'd lose my day-to-day stuff. So I do use the cloud for my daily backups as well. Is there anything else in there that I could maybe try to bring my clients involved in that
Yeah.
aren't technically savvy, but they might be able to see the model maybe? Or
Oh yes, absolutely. So with BIM 360, it's got the large model viewer capability in it. So you just send them the link and they're able to view the model or view the sheets directly there from BIM 360. You can also use things like technologies like OneDrive to store other types of things and then share out that stuff to other folks. You send them a link and they're looking at the same information that you're looking at. So it makes some collaboration a little bit easier by doing that sort of thing.
It has its own markup tools as well. So when you're on there, and what I like to say is that there's no license requirement for a guest, right? So your client could log on and be able to see the sheet or the 3D model. He or she can cut sections. They can look at all kinds of different stuff as they see it. If you really get into BIM 360 and get into some of their other tools, I mean, they've got field and glue, so you can do some clashing with your consultants if you wanted to. You can also basically you can get to a point where you have a tablet in hand on the site, and you could pull up the model with a QR code and have the 3D version of the model on the tablet, and as you kind of walk around, you're seeing what's there. So there's a lot to BIM 360. The design portion and the construction portion are separate, but the as Bob said, the version control and the ability to see things without a license on a tablet in the field is pretty impressive.
Perfect.
Scott Finello, he just posted on the chat thing. Cute, Scott. Thanks.
Yeah, let's not have that happen. But it would be a good promotion for
it's not
having everything
plugged in.
So with regards to technology, what are your day-to-day challenges? Is everything running smoothly? Everything's perfect, and this could be any kind of technology that you're using. What are your day-to-day challenges that you're seeing that you're addressing right now?
Internet brownouts are one of our biggest challenges.
Okay. And there's at this point really nothing that you're not in control of that. So
no, and it's unfortunate because sometimes it'll drop meetings, and it's not necessarily. So Phoenix seems to kind of do a rolling blackout. I don't really understand the system, but one day my area will be out for a few hours, and the next day or two, the area on the other side of the valley will be out for a few hours. When we first started, there was some major problems with that. We had problems almost every day with someone not being able to connect. And then another problem that we've had that we've kind of fixed is there's a few people that just don't have internet. They don't have the ability to have internet at the place they live. So getting them, mobile hotspots and being able to get some form of connection has helped, but those are some of our biggest struggles since we've done this.
Yeah, we haven't really seen cases of internet brownouts in most of our regions, but VPN connection quality has certainly been an issue. We went from approximately 10 to 12 VPN gateways to 150 VPN gateways, and I think they're still adding more because a new one popped up recently that I wasn't aware had one. So that's probably the biggest issue, is that just going through a VPN connection by nature sometimes limits your bandwidth because of the nature of the VPN itself. And for true performance on BIM 360 or leveraging your home internet connection fully as far as its speed capabilities go, technically you should drop off VPN, but then you don't have access to those corporate resources that are behind the firewall. So there's a balancing act that can happen there. And then there's also certain issues where a particular gateway gets overloaded, then people running on BIM 360 start seeing weird little issues cropping up, and it's simply because they need to switch their VPN gateway to something else that isn't quite as taxed.
And for me, the biggest technology issue that I'm still trying to overcome, and I'm to be honest with you, I don't see a solution quite yet. Because I do a lot of rezonings and public hearing processes, we're still required to have neighborhood meetings. And neighborhood meetings are very sensitive because you have to be able to document them, you have to be able to reach out to all the neighbors that are affected. And for us, finding a technology that can meet all of the neighbors' needs, because a lot of people don't even own a computer. So just to get notifications out, to get them to find a platform that I can host, because I don't own GoToMeeting. I'm forced to use Zoom or the other one that comes with my professional Windows. But the problem is that a lot of those don't allow the call-in portion, because then people have to be able to call in rather than and they don't get to see the exhibit. So then I got to start dealing with, well, which people I need to mail out hard copies. So as of right now, I haven't done a public neighborhood meeting since this whole COVID hit. And that has really impacted me on some of my rezoning cases and things that involve neighborhood meetings.
Good. All right. Kind of a question that we had in one of the last town halls that we did. Where do you feel like as an industry, and it's good to get, people actually, like Stephen, Bob, and John who are out there, where is BIM as a whole heading? What is the next greatest thing? What do you guys see as the future, and where are you aligning yourselves with it?
Well, it's really all about the data. It's always about the data, but I think that leveraging that data, people are becoming more intelligent about understanding that the data is important inside the model, and finding ways to leverage that data from the model back into the real world. We've got mental fatigue from hearing about digital twins, but there is some merit to that, where an owner having the intelligent data behind the scenes and seeing what's going on with their building is really important to them. And that all starts from having the data in the first place.
Well, I'm going to talk on the professional level of at least what I'm running into on my side of the fence. And it's interesting because a lot of people here in town know exactly what I do. And we've had this conversation for years now. And I keep running into the same problem. And I guess people that do this for a living, you'll understand where I'm coming from. I tried just to get a contractor who I work with a lot. And I tried to get them to go ahead and pay me to bring my laptop into their office and actually open up the model and help them do cost estimating. Because as many of you know, I model it the way you build it. I actually model everything. So vinyl wall covering is actually modeled. It's actually a wall layer. Ceramic tile is a specific wall material, so it tags. I get all my quantities, my carpet patterns, tile patterns, all of that. I actually model it so that it visualizes perfectly. But also then I know what the quantities are and I see how to do this. When I try to convince the contractor buddies of mine that are in this business and see the benefit of that, they then open up a model of a firm that they might be working with and the model is so poorly modeled, they don't get the benefit of that at all. I mean, it's sad to say how little the people understand what modeling should be for what it is we preach. So it's almost like people are using this technology, and I'll just say they're using Revit because I won't say they're using BIM, but they are using Revit. They use Revit far enough to get what they need on the drawings, and then what they don't know how to do, obviously they fill in with AutoCAD or with drafted lines and meaningless information. So the goal, although we all know what the goal is, a lot of us can't achieve it because the models, unfortunately, are of such poor quality. And I'm seeing that just time and time and time again. And these are from very reliable, respectable firms that claim, total BIM. We've been doing this for 10 years. And that's just the experience I've seen here in Tucson. I don't know if it's different anywhere else.
No, I would agree with you. We're working on a really large project with multiple consultants and architectural clients on behalf of a very large owner. And in that team, we're the only ones that are doing certain things in the models, and sometimes we're getting pushback from the rest of the team saying, well, why do we have to do it this way, because no one else is doing it this way? And the response being, well, we're using Revit correctly, isn't politically correct, right?
You don't win an argument by saying wrong.
Right. So that's absolutely a valid struggle, is that, and it could be that in some cases firms have latched on to some workflow that makes sense for them, that they don't put the information in the model because they can efficiently, or they've efficiently developed tools that allow them to rip what they need out of the model to stuff it into something else and leverage the information over there where they're more comfortable, or the workflow is better, or something along those lines. But the end result ultimately is that the model is nothing more than a collection of dumb objects, if there are objects at all.
I think a problem, though, that we have, and this is an industry problem, is a lot of times our contracts don't let us model to a point that we want to. I think, Stephen, you have the ability to do, you are a one-stop shop, so you're able to push what you're going to do for you because you know the benefits. But a lot of times, there are times where contracts say that we have to be a LOD 200, and an LOD 200 just isn't there. It's not something that is, a data-rich model. It's very 2D. It's very, it limits the information you're allowed to put in the model. And even in those cases, a lot of times, we go over and above that, but we can only go to we're only getting paid to do a certain job. And a lot of times what we want to do as people in this industry, we want to be able to have every tile modeled correctly and be able to do all of those. But when you have to look at, okay, we only have this many hours and our contract says this, a lot of times we have to find our shortcuts. And unfortunately, that's where, as an industry, we need to fix our contracts. And before we can do anything to really push models, I think the contracts are the first thing that have to get looked at.
Well, let me ask you a question, John. When you say an LOD 200 model, I hear that phrase, and that's basically telling me they just want to do a design development project. And they're not even asking for working drawings at that point, because LOD 200 does not address what a contractor needs, bare minimum, nor what you need for permitting. So I can understand taking drawings purely to a design development or a design intent, whatever you choose to call that phase. But that's almost LOD 200, what you just described, where you're not really putting any real information on there and you're not modeling to that level, because you're right. It's all about the visualization and almost to where someone has to take over the model from that point on.
Yeah.
And work with it. So to me, that's more of a design intent drawing, which I can totally understand, because now you're doing drawings for the benefit of only visualizing it.
And I would agree. And I think, again, it's the way both our clients have looked at things, and the way that different firms have looked at things, that's all that they're pricing. And that's not necessarily for every contract, but it's definitely something that I've seen both, in the Southwest where I'm at now and the Midwest where I was before, that's been a problem is what we say we can provide for the price that we're providing it and what we actually could provide for a bit more. So I think it's a bigger conversation. I think it could last for the rest of the time we have if we really got into it. But to me, that's the first step that we have to fix. We have to fix our client's understanding of what can be provided and what the cost is to do that. And then I think we can get to a point where we can do what you're doing, which is everything's modeled. And to be honest, if you take it a step further, I think the cities and the permitting staff, we need to get to a point where a paper 2D drawing isn't what they're reviewing. Because the longer we have a paper 2D drawing, the more people can then continue not putting data and not doing the correct modeling. Well, if you consider fully modeled correct, some people don't. But anyways, if a 2D drawing is our final document, then there's a lot of people that go, there's no point in doing all of this extra work. So if we can get to a point where a 3D model or a fully coordinated 3D model is the actual finished deliverable, then I think we start to get to a point where we can do what you're doing.
Right.
And it's funny because I've actually had this discussion with a lot of architects that I've helped or clients, and in every argument I win, because if it's modeled correctly, the drawings are the byproduct of the model. So I can produce a set of drawings, I can crank out 10 interior elevations in 20 sections faster than anybody can possibly do them because it's actually modeled correctly. I don't have to go back and correct anything. So that's where I think everyone needs to, this is where the whole mindset of what it is BIM and Revit have done to our profession. We've just come out of a world where it was a graphic representation and accuracy wasn't really what it was all about. And everything's now, it is a game changer. And it is interesting to see how some people still just don't get it. And it's just education.
Terry Phillips just posted an interesting comment in the Q&A related to LOD 200 contract limitations on how ultimately if we have to educate the client because they don't understand what the benefits are, we're already losing the game. And that's really true.
Yeah.
If an owner doesn't care about something, then no matter how good the contract is or how good the model is or how good the design team is, if they don't care, they just want it done as cheaply and as quickly as possible. We see this a lot of times with some of our smaller clients who have been long-term clients. They're used to getting stuff from the AutoCAD days and they don't really care about a lot of things that a BIM would really provide. All they really want is a building at the end and done as cheaply as possible. And I think that's an area where we're going to face that for a long, long time to come, because we talk about fixing the contracts. We've always talked about fixing the contracts, right? This is, we could go back for 30 years and see this exact comment being made over and over again. So that's not really going to necessarily address the issue, nor is design fee. If we're doing more modeling, and especially on the MEP side, this is a real struggle because we're being asked to more accurately model things where the design fees were built on, we just tell you how big the thing has to be. You need a duct that's this big. We don't really care how you route it. You just need it to be this big, right? So those sorts of issues in fee structure and how the contracts are written, there are going to be owners out there for years to come that really don't care. And that means that we can't really develop a fully fledged, perfect packaged BIM process, because that'll work for the clients that want it and are willing to pay for it. But there's no way you're going to be able to afford that on those projects where the owner doesn't care for those things. That stuff is going to add cost to the project.
And
Even if
Bob,
you've got a great library.
What you've been saying, Bob, back when I first started in my career, back just a couple of years ago, there used to be what they call builder sets. and they were specifically for the people that didn't want to spend a lot of money. They just had the attitude of, we don't know what we're doing anyway, so why would I want to spend more money on it? I'll just get the bare minimum to go get a permit, and then I'll just figure it out in the field. That's a decision that every professional needs to make at the beginning of their career. It's almost like you need to set your own ground rules for where you set your level of performance and your level of professionalism and what you expect out of your own business. And I think that's kind of already been done. I mean, there's people out there that do exactly what you suggest. There's people that take it to a certain level and they're fine leaving it nebulous because they just know the clients are going to just fix it in the field. They won't get sued. You know, they don't have to worry about documenting everything. And then you're right, there's people like me that are kind of on the other extreme. And as John alluded to, I'm a one-person shop. I have the luxury of doing whatever I want to do. I do have that luxury and I appreciate it. So you're right. I kind of cheat the system. But at the same time, I feel you need to be shown the different varieties that BIM can be utilized. Because I think there's a huge level between just doing design-oriented drawings and doing full-blown CDs that leverage everything and then going into facility management and leveraging the drawings even further than I do, you know, for operating the building. I think that's the benefit of BIM. You can almost just use it to the level you're comfortable with.
And I think that's what Bob said earlier about leveraging the data. And I think we're starting to see that. And I would say that, you know, it may not be exponential, but I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot more of it, especially with the larger clients. And again, I think if we can push, like OshPod, for example, we do a lot of OshPod projects. We're healthcare California. So it took them forever to get electronic submittals going. And then all of a sudden now they're all electronic with COVID the way it is. And I don't think that's going to change going forward. I don't see that that's going to go back to a paper copy. Now they'll have that as an option probably for a while, but eventually that's going to disappear, right? Just like all of their markups have went electronic. So the more we can push technology, I think the more clients will accept better modeling. You know, I think it's just like when I mean, this is before my time, but people used to charge to use Revit instead of CAD, or people used to charge to use CAD instead of hand drafting. I think the same thing's going to happen with like BIM 360 and with fully coordinated models and getting to a point where we don't have an LOD. We just model everything to the fullest all the time. I feel like we're going to get there, but it will take time. And it'll take, as you said, it'll take knowledge. It takes teaching. It takes letting all of our clients and everybody else that's in this industry understand what's possible. And that, like DBI, that's one of the things that Built, I think, does very well is they show what's next. So there's a plug for you, Bob.
Thanks.
Perfect. So we're coming up on 10 o'clock right now. There are a couple of questions that, and I think we could do an entire separate panel discussion on this topic that right there with contracts, LOD, and the expectations. So I'll take note of that, and then because we will be doing these town halls more regularly now, and you know, having our customers and our technical specialists on it to really talk about what's going on in the industry. So I like that discussion. I want to make sure, because someone had a question regarding a little bit more information regarding accessing a model on field with a QR code. Does it come with BIM 360 design? Curious about how to view the model without needing a license. And I think, John, you were the one that kind of touched on that. So if you could just maybe do a final quick answer on that. And it's an anonymous person, so I don't have any way to reach out to them necessarily. So if you can give them any information.
I may have blended two things together, and I'm sorry for that. So to get on BIM 360 through a web page or through your tablet on a web page is free. As long as someone sends you an email to add you to the project hub, you can have access. You can look through what you need to, depending on your permissions. The field is not free. Field is a paid subscription. And the QR coding, I haven't actually been the one putting it together, but I've been on site where someone has done it in front of me. And I know it was through Field and BIM 360. So that's the best I can tell you. I'm sure that Emily could probably get into that more than I can.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to reach out to myself, because since it just says anonymous, I don't know how to contact you. Reach out to myself or anyone on the panel, and we can get you more information about that for sure. Okay. All right. So any final closing statements, thoughts, and we'll just go ahead and wrap this up. And I appreciate everyone's time. If for those attendees who need to jump off and get back to work, thank you for attending. And I'll just go around and maybe just one final thought from everyone.
To be honest, this was my first town hall, so thank you for having me, and this was a lot of fun. I'd be interested to do another one.
We'll sign you up for the next one regarding LOD and contracts. We'll start the movement.
So I just want to thank you as well.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me and just look over my shoulder, and that's the only real effect I feel with COVID. I haven't been on stage in over 6 months. So I'm kind of jonesing.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Well, Steve, just take up Star Destroyer Lego building. That'll help.
You know, I was a model builder, but you know, this will show my age. Hang on. Hang on, I'm coming. This is what I grew up building. This is my idea of modeling. Yep. So I've got probably 20 or 30 of these all over the place, and they're spread out all over the country, and pretty soon I'll be bringing home my biggest ship, which is over 7 feet long, and that'll come home pretty soon. But this is my idea of modeling.
Nice.
So I appreciated yours when I saw yours behind you.
Yep. All right. I enjoyed this discussion too, so it's nice hearing perspectives across the wide variety.
Yeah, and I definitely look forward to more of these. Patrick, I know we didn't really get to jump in on kind of the dynamo. I was hoping to get a little bit more information and thoughts on that, but again, I think we could have a focused discussion on that in the future.
No, that's fine. It was good hearing like perspectives from others on what's going on. I guess my last closing thought is strive for lean BIM. Strive for lean BIM and push for the I.
I like it.
Perfect. That is a great final thought. So, all right. Thank you all, and I will be in touch with everyone. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.